Hello everyone. We are on day 15 of 21 days to receiving good. And today I wanted to talk about self-forgiveness. And I think this is so important. We often talk about, we don't notice how often we really judge ourselves. Like self-judgment can be so sneaky. It's something that I see all the time when working with clients. And of course, I see it myself when I see it. And then the person I work with sees it in me. And it's why it's so important, though. I'm going to say we live in a culture that I think most of us, it's almost like for many different reasons, if we're hard on ourselves, then somehow we're avoiding the hard when someone else is hard on us, or it's just something that's been taught. I know in my upbringing and the religion I was raised in, it was all about, not feeling worthy, and self-forgiveness wasn't even taught. It's like you had to go to God to be forgiven. You couldn't forgive yourself. But I believe you can. And I believe that is the most important thing, is to learn self-forgiveness, because I truly believe when we come to a place of self-forgiveness, it can change everything. And I'm not saying, oh, I forgive myself all the time. Of course, anything to me, still being in a body, is a work in progress. And that's why I find it so important, if you have photos of yourself as your child self around your house, particularly one, I have the one when I'm 6, when you can look at that, when you catch yourself beating yourself up, and you can go to that photo and imagine saying all the things you're saying to yourself to that younger version of yourself. I think for most of us, that's pretty hard to do, to really look at that younger version of ourselves and do that. And then if you can, it's something to tap on. Because I always say it this way, we learn to treat ourselves the way we were treated. And that's the truth. You learn to treat yourself how you were treated as a child, and we carry that into adulthood. So how does one forgive oneself? I believe that, to me, one of the best ways to start is to catch it first, of course, and maybe even just by talking about this, you'll start to notice it more. Catching it when you can, or having somebody else notice that. I think it's often hard to notice how hard we are on ourselves. So when you'll start to pay attention to your inner dialogue, and it's that very inner, the inner critic, I call it the bully in your brain, you can call it the ego, the small self. When you notice you're feeling bad, that's a pretty clear indicator that you are being really hard on yourself, like really hard on yourself. So it's just really something to pay attention to. And I'm finding the fastest way now is look at that younger version of yourself as a little kid, and try and say all those crappy things to that version of you, and you'll notice how hard it is. And I did post a video in this group of a experiment they did with people, and they would talk about, what's wrong with them, what their flaws and foibles are, and then they would hand them a picture of themselves as a child and say it to him, say it to her. And how hard it was for people to do that, and how people were like, I can't do it. I don't want to. And I think that is such a powerful way to start to help you to notice self-judgment and self-recrimination, so that you can learn to forgive yourself. So that said, let's do some tapping. So call to mind something in your life, that thing. This is probably the easiest way to say it. If you could do it all over again, it's that thing that you would do so differently. You would make a really different choice. That thing. So one thing to know about that is the sheer fact that you'd do it differently really says you got the lesson. So, but call to mind that thing. Oh God, I would change that. It's that thing you want to shake your head to get out of your head, or it makes you cringe thinking about it. You're like, oh God, that thing. So call to mind that thing that if you had a chance to do it all over again, you would do this thing differently. That, ugh. And just go to the eyebrow. Hello, whoever's here. there I am. Oh my God. I want to cringe. I would do that over in a red hot minute, in a heartbeat. I can't believe I did that. And clearly I haven't forgiven myself for it. In fact, I'm still judging myself epically for this. Every time I think about it, I really want to cringe. I'm so ashamed. I'm so mad at myself. I can't believe I said those things. I can't believe I did those things. And I have not forgiven me. Why should I? Look at me. Look at how I behaved then. Look at what I said and did. That version of me doesn't deserve forgiveness. That version of me needs to be annihilated, gotten rid of. And I don't know how to do that. So I'm stuck. But what if the version of me that did that is a really young version of me? It's that inner child in me that was running my show back then, that was so triggered, that didn't know how to do it any differently. And what if I can see that part of myself with some loving kindness and compassion? What? No, that was me as an adult. I knew better. I shouldn't have done that. I should have stopped myself. And here's the truth. I am looking at this now with the benefit of hindsight. If I had known then what I know now, I would have done it differently. But back then, I was a different person with a different frame of mind. Back then, that was me. Absolutely doing the best I could. Even if I don't believe that right now. But what if I can start to see this differently? That really was me, doing the best I could. Where I was at. If I could have done it differently back then, I truly would have. But I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it differently. So what if I can really look at that part of me and just consider sending it some loving kindness, truly loving kindness, just like that much. If I saw a little child behaving that way, that I knew was hurting and wounded, I think I might send that child love and compassion. And that's exactly who was running my show back then. I would have totally done it differently if I could have. So the thing I've been carrying around, dragging around like a ball and chain, not forgiving myself for, what if this is the very thing to consider forgiving myself for? And what if, by just considering forgiving this part of me that I've deemed as unworthy, the worst part of me, by forgiving this part of me, I'm actually forgiving that wounded child in me. And that child in me has been beat up long enough. And I may not be ready to do this yet, but what if I could just be open to the idea that by learning to love and accept and forgive this wounded part of me, I actually do the best possible thing I can. First and foremost, for myself, the most important person in my life. And what if, by forgiving myself, I'm doing my part to help shift things on the planet? Because if I'm walking around with more self-forgiveness within, doesn't that have an impact on those around me? Even energetically? I like that idea a lot. And I really love the idea that the person I've been so unforgiving for, so judgmental of, so hard on, is that little tiny kid in me. And when I start to send that child in me more forgiveness, more loving kindness, I start to realize there's really nothing to forgive. That little child's been so wounded. And that little child in me is so brilliant to have figured out how to survive and how to cope when no one showed this part of me how? So as best as I'm able, right here and now, I'm going to consider sending forgiveness to this little wounded child in me and see what happens. And then take a breath. So I do find it's so helpful to separate from that. I mean, many of you know the story. When my husband and I used to get sort of an irritation. Hey, Fiona. Oh, good. Awesome. Ara, awesome. I would get so hooked. Like I had such abandonment issues, which makes so much sense when I know my background. So if we would get in an argument and he's like, I need space, or, you know, and his kid's running his show, mine's running my show. It was like, I was like, oh, no. Hey, Barbara. Oh my God. No. We got to talk. It's like, that's how I was. And it's what I saw my mother do too. And it's interesting. And I had a therapist tell me this. Oh, Marti, your little kid's activated, which many of you have heard. And I was like, oh, wow, that is so good to know. So I started using that to go, oh, my kid's activated. My kid's running my show. I guarantee you, the person that's sitting here right now present with you, if somebody's like doing that, I'm not going to be like, oh, we got to talk about it. I am so able now, more often than not, to be like, yeah, let's talk later. Or, you know, let's deal with it later. Because I've attended to that wounded child in me more and more that's like, we got to talk. Just knowing when you behave in a way, say you go back to that past event where you're unforgiving, which is how this video started, and you think about that was you, your little kid, getting activated and behaving that way, no matter what it was. And when you can start to go, wow, my kid was activated, and that's the part of me that was behaving that way. That part of me was running my show. It's huge because you start to separate from that. And I know this from personal experience, how that behavior that I had, like it was like, oh my God, we got to talk about this. We got to work it out. I just don't have that. I mean, it rarely shows up. I'll say it that way. And if it does, it's such a mild version, and I'll catch myself so much faster. So the way I break this down, which I found helpful, and some of you know this, is there's parts work, internal family systems. I've always said I'm the type of person I could complicate a freaking potato chip, so I need to keep it really simple. You know, one's my aunt's voice, my grandfather's voice, my mother's voice. I'm like, oh my God. So I just said, there's that bully in our brain. It's that culmination of all the internal critical voices that we heard growing up. And that's the part of you that's like, you'll never make it. Who do you think you are? You shouldn't forgive yourself. It sounds like that. It's like, I call it Hagatha. It's like, that voice, when it's that punitive, just gets down on you. That's when you know the bully's activated. The kid is, anytime you have a strong emotional charge to something, you're triggered like that, or oh God, or, you know, flare up in anger. That's a really clear indication that your little kid is activated, and that's who's running your show. So when you start to and what often happens is the kid and the bully go to battle. You know, the kid gets activated. Oh, buck up. That, you know, it's the self-judgment. That's why it can feel so hard to change it, because that internal battle's going on. When you start to go, who's running my show? You just ask yourself that question. Who's the one asking the question? It's, to me, that adult, healthy, higher part of us that's like, oh, something's amiss here. You know, that something's happening. And when I first heard all, like, you know, noticing, watching the thinker like Eckhart Tolle, I was like, whatever. I so get it now in a way that I just couldn't. And for me, I'm like, I'm sort of pragmatic about this stuff, even though I totally believe in higher consciousness and all that stuff. I just go, how can I deal with this? It's great to have all these higher concepts, but I'm still in a body, and how do I find a better way with this? It's huge to just go, okay, who's running my show right now? I am so activated emotionally. It's my kid. And if you hear that, critical, you'll never make it. Who do you think you are? You're not worthy. You shouldn't forgive yourself. That's the bully. And just by noticing those two parts, it really, I cannot tell you how helpful it is. How often, like, I'll catch it now, like, I'm charged. That's my kid. And I catch it because I've had a few years of practice now. Before it was running rampant on me because I just was thinking, I'm a mess, I'm a wreck, I can't handle myself, I'm screwed up. And then I'm like, Marty, your kid's running your show right now. You start to separate and you start to realize you're not this big, what is the term they use now, big hot mess. You just have these parts that get activated, and when you start to soothe them and become forgiving of that part of you, I cannot tell you what it does to change things. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that tapping. Whoever's here, Barbara, Ara, Fiona, and looks like somebody else is here. That's it for day 15. Back tomorrow with day 16. Have a great rest of your day. It's gotten quite chilly here. Bye for now. See ya.